Hey guys, it's Coach Gaglione from GaglioneStrength.com. We got another strong woman on the line today. We have Beth. How you doing tonight?
Good. How are you doing?
We're doing great. So thank you again for coming on the line.
Sure.
For those that don't know who you are, can you just introduce yourself, a little bit about yourself, and what you got going on right now?
Yep. I do, or I have done powerlifting for about 11 years now. I started competing in 2005, and I did multiply. Started out raw, switched to multiply fairly quickly. I've done about 25 to 30 meets probably. Competed anywhere from 148 down to 123. And now I'm actually switching over to strongman. I have a competition in about 5 weeks coming up.
Very
And
cool.
CrossFit for a couple years. Did CrossFit and powerlifting, but that didn't work so well. So had to pick one avenue and went with powerlifting because that was my first love and probably always will be.
Sure. And then for those that aren't familiar with like kind of equipment and stuff, can you kind of explain to the people watching, maybe they're unfamiliar with what that
Hmm.
actually entails and like what's kind of the difference between like the equipped lifting versus like the raw lifting?
Sure, yeah. Raw lifting, I think everyone's pretty familiar with that, especially now. Being CrossFit has gotten a lot of females into lifting. A lot of people are going to watch competitions. There's even been a few CrossFit competitions that have had a powerlifting total, so I think everyone kind of understands the raw, and then you have raw with knee wraps, classic raw, all the different divisions now. But basically, raw is sort of raw these days, I guess you would say. Um, there's different kinds of equipped lifting, single ply, which is, to put it simply, just one single ply of equipment, and then multiply is pretty much unlimited. You have from canvas to double ply poly up from there. So the main difference, I think, is technique and time. You have to be super particular and on point with your technique with gear. If you have one little flaw, you're done with that lift. So you have to be especially technical lifter, very patient. I think you definitely do better if you have had a base. I think I lifted raw for 4 or 5 years before I ever got in gear. I see a lot of people now just kind of jumping in gear pretty
Yeah.
quickly. I definitely think having a base is going to make you a lot more successful. So helps you lift more, depending how technical you are. Some people get in gear, and I have one girl I coach who actually does less in gear because she just can't get the technique down. So a lot of people think you just throw on gear and you're automatically going to be
Sure.
stronger, but definitely not the case. But I love it because I love the challenge. I love fine tuning technique, and obviously I love being able to handle the heavier loads.
Cool. Yeah, I have a kind of similar. I lived in like raw for about 5 years too, and then that's when I kind of got into it. And I actually, my first equipped meet, I didn't even wear a deadlift suit because I couldn't figure it out. So,
Yeah,
so I think it's
yeah,
definitely a learning curve, and I think I was actually just at a local competition, and I saw like some kind of high school team with wearing gear and stuff, and it's kind of like wasn't really the biggest fan, but I do think it's an option. I think it's a great that we have you on the call today. We had one of the other guests, Rita West. We had on also, who was a great lifter also, and you know, I think it's just a lot of people just don't understand it. It's just another option for those of you guys, maybe that girls that have been in the sport for a while, and it's just like a change of pace. So,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
so I want to kind of
Yeah.
rewind a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
like, how did you actually get into strength training in general, even before like competing and powerlifting and stuff like that? What led you to strength training and ultimately then eventually competing?
Well, I was always an athlete from the time I was really young, and did 4 or 5 sports in high school, four pretty competitively. And so coming out of high school, I really fell in love with lifting my junior and senior year of high school, and I feel like they really started to focus more on weight training. And I did track and field, and I did throwing events, which weightlifting was a huge part of that. So really fell in love with that. And then when I quit high school, I guess, just transitioned right into training during college and hung out at the gym all the time. And they finally just asked me to work there because I hung out there so much. So got into that. And then couple of the guys I trained with were training for a bench meet, and I didn't really know what it was, but I was up for the challenge. I miss competing after high school. I really like competition and having goals. So just started training with them, and I did my first meet, and I loved it, and I've done it ever since.
Was there ever like a point or like an event where you're like, I want to take this to the next level? Like obviously you've been competing, you know, a decade's a long time for you to do something,
Yeah.
to put in that much time and effort. So obviously, was there ever a turning point where you're like, I want to take this to the next level and like really kind of commit to it and try and compete at like a more like kind of national like level?
Um, I think that happened fairly quickly for me just because of the people I was surrounded with were high level lifters. I was pretty lucky. I got to, Louis helped me out. Louis Simmons helped me out a lot at the beginning. And even though I was a newbie, he is always willing to help anybody
Yeah,
that
that's
asks
great.
and people he sees potential in. So I think right away I saw them doing it, and I saw these high level lifters, like Chuck and all those big guys back in the day that were huge West Side lifters. So seeing them, and I got into competing at nationals fairly quickly. So I'd say within 2 years of getting in multiply, I was lifting national and world meets, which these days it really doesn't mean much, but back then it's a little bit different. Watching the WPO days at the Arnold and
Yeah.
Era and Becca, watching them lift is pretty cool, and definitely knew it was something I was going to stick with. And you see so many people come and go after they realize how much work it takes, or
Sure.
you're training for 3-4 years and you don't hit a PR. I mean, you have to have persistence, and you got to have dedication to the sport. And I wanted to keep going until I hit my goals, and I did.
Awesome. So obviously, with a decade of lifting, competing at a high level, I'm sure you've had some setbacks. I'm sure dealt with some adversity. Talk to us about that a little bit, and then what did you do to kind of overcome some of those setbacks?
Um, I would say the major setbacks I had were back issues, which I think is huge. I mean, that comes from a lot of people, and that actually stems from an accident in high school in weightlifting class, because strength and conditioning coaches then didn't know what they were doing. We just loaded the bar up and went.
Sure.
So I had a pretty severe back injury in high school, and if I wasn't on top of it and didn't take care of it, it reoccurred up until about 3 years ago. I was fortunate enough. My coach at the time, Brian Carroll, hooked me up with Dr. McGill.
Yeah.
So I could go up to him and go into his lab, and he did everything. And it actually ended up being as a pretty unusual thing. But I also had some compression fractures and a couple other things going on. So I took 10 weeks completely off, did nothing but walk, and did some of the exercises McGill had set me up with, and that was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I've never gone 10 weeks, even having my daughter. I didn't even barely go a week. So mentally it was extremely hard, but I knew if I wanted to continue lifting, I was going to do whatever he told me to do, because I knew, he's the man when it comes to back injuries. So
Sure.
whatever he said, I was going to listen to, and I did, and then came back and started training for the Arnold shortly after. And I just think all those years of lifting, you take a couple weeks off, it's not going to throw you off, compared to a new lifter that takes a few weeks off. But all those years of lifting, my body, I just picked right back up and actually had a pretty decent meet immediately after coming off that back rehab. And really the only other setback, I've been pretty fortunate with injuries. The only other major setback I had was a pretty bad hamstring tear that actually has bothered me for years. And overcoming that, it affected my deadlift for years. I didn't hit a deadlift PR for over 7 years, just because that hamstring had so much scar tissue. And that was that was pretty crazy, long time coming. But I've recently been working with some really good PT people, going into strongman, and coming out of gear. Gear did definitely help support that. So coming out of gear, I had to fix it, and going into strongman, so much deadlifts and stones and whatnot. So the past 5 weeks is the first time in a while that I've gone without pain, sitting or deadlifting, and so I'm pretty excited about that. I'm
It's awesome.
curious to see what I can do once I come out of this strongman, going back into some raw powerlifting. So,
So I just
but
want to
you gotta stick with the bad, and you
right.
gotta be persistent. Yeah.
What advice can you give someone because about like your mindset, because like I've been in a similar situation where I haven't it wasn't 7 years, but I went 3 years without a deadlift PR myself, and a lot of these newer lifters, they don't really kind of like understand, like there might be some times where like you don't hit a PR for a while. And what kind of advice can you give someone if maybe they're kind of plateauing, regardless of injuries or not? Like, what advice can you give them about like how do you kind of mentally approach that, and how do you kind of move forward and keep what motivates you to kind of keep going even when you're not making progress?
Yeah, that's super common. I mean, I have clients that week to week, if they don't hit a PR, they get pissed off, and I put them in check right away. Strength isn't linear. You're not gonna,
Right.
keep getting stronger and stronger and stronger. It's not gonna happen. So I always just tell them, as long as something is changing, it could be, your deadlift might not be getting better, but your technique is spot on now,
Sure.
or your squats going up, or your bench is going up, or being in the sport a long time, you got to just find little things that keep you going. And like I said, you have to have a passion and a love for the sport. I mean, I've gone meets where I've hit like 1 or 2 pound PRs, but it's a big deal to me if I hit
Sure.
any after this long. So you got to look at the big picture, and if you're still healthy. I mean, I feel like I'm pretty fortunate to lift and do CrossFit and strongman and everything, and still be able to run around with my daughter and do whatever I want on a day-to-day basis. So it's not just lifting that's important. You got to look at the whole picture and find little things, your diet on point, or did you run a mile faster than you ever have? Just one little thing that I can pick out that they've improved on, and then it puts them back into the right mindset.
Awesome, and that's great advice. Cause I think, especially now, like I think kind of when we were kind of in the sport and kind of getting into it, like multiply was the thing. It was kind of a fringe thing. It's getting a little bit more mainstream. We're getting more and more kind of people kind of coming into the sport, and there are a lot of newer people, and they don't really kind of like appreciate the kind of time and effort I think it takes to really get really good at this. So I think that's
Mm-hmm.
great advice. So just want to kind of switch gears a little bit also, and so now you're kind of like entering strongman. You're kind of doing a different sport. Uh, what kind of made you kind of switch gears from like your from powerlifting kind of to try something new?
Well, I had a certain numbers I wanted to hit in powerlifting, and it's a selfish sport. It takes a lot of time. I mean, getting ready for the Arnold, I traveled an hour both ways on the weekends. I was gone from 5 in the morning till noon. I have a daughter, and I work full-time job, and I train clients. So during the week, I do my training at 6 in the morning, and on the weekends it was early. And I just knew at some point something had to give. I couldn't keep training, 20 hours a week, working 50 hours a week, and trying to find time to spend with my daughter. It's not fair to her. So
Yeah.
I told myself when I hit those numbers, I was going to be done. And I did, and I switched to another sport. I think I'll always do something competitive, whether it's strongman, physique. I'll probably never go back to CrossFit, but I would do some competitions that are CrossFit like, maybe strongman CrossFit, Olympic lifting. I think the main reason is just the time. That's the
Yeah.
main reason that I got out of multiply. It's a huge time commitment, and I felt like I put my time in. I did what I wanted to do, and she's getting older, and she has her sports now, and she grew up in the gym, so it's time to take a little bit of that back. And strongman, I love it so far. I have one long day, events day on Saturday, and my other days I do early mornings, and doesn't take a lot of time, and it's super challenging for me because I haven't done a lot of the
Sure.
things. Some of it I have, but definitely I love the challenge of it, and I'm excited to compete and just see how the competition is compared to powerlifting, and how it's different and everything. So I'm excited about it.
Great. So just kind of echoing your point before about you want to spend a little more time with your daughter, kind of you're a mom, so for maybe moms out there that kind of want to get into this, I mean, what's some advice that you can give them to balance like the family and your own personal goals?
You have to prioritize, and keep myself on a pretty tight schedule. I mean, they said I get it in the mornings early. It sucks. I'm up at 4:30, 4:45 every single day, but it's either that or I would go after work and I would not see her. So
Yeah.
you make sacrifices, and if there's not much going on at 6 in the morning that's going to come up at night. You can be kept at work late, or you run in it's taking me an hour to get home from work at night, or stuff can come up. In the morning, it's less likely that you're going to run into issues. And I feel like you have to keep a strict schedule. You can't just say, I'm going to work out 3 days a week. You have to say, I'm going to work out Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 6 a.m. Have a set schedule and stick to it. Make it part of your day, part of your routine.
Very cool. So, next question for you: if someone's kind of like on the fence about getting started in like whether it be powerlifting, strongman, or whatever it is, just getting into strength like sports, what advice could you give them?
Find someone that knows what they're doing. Find a good coach. I think that's huge. Even just going into different gyms, will watch a group and everyone's telling somebody something different. You got to find someone that you trust and that has experience and has been there and done that, and just stick to that one person and make sure you have the motivation to do it. Stick with it. Don't just do it for a few weeks. I mean, the first few weeks I did strongman, I was horrible. I mean, I thought I just sucked, but I knew it took time and it's going to take, some commitment. So I think you have to be dedicated to it and find someone that knows what they're doing and stick with that person and have trust in them. It's going to take you a long ways.
All right, very cool. Well, we'll probably close out soon, but you could stay on like after the recording is done. So thank you so much for coming on. So I know you said you do a little coaching, you got some stuff online. If people want to find out more about you, where can they follow you and where can they find out more about you?
I'm always on Facebook. I have my Facebook, Beth Thomas, and I train people out of Hines Park, CrossFit in Northville. And then I do all my strongman training at Strength Depot in Livonia, which they just expanded and moved into a bigger location. So awesome facility for strongman or powerlifting. So they can find me there, or my email is emthomas549@gmail.com. I train a handful of people online and then mainly people in person. And right now, 95% of my clients are competing in something: strongman, CrossFit, powerlifting. I don't coach strongman because I don't feel like I'm qualified to do that, but I do take care. A lot of the clients I have that do multiple sports, I'll do their strength aspect of it, and then someone else does their Olympic lifting, their strongman portion of it.
Sure.
So I feel like you get in your lane when it comes to coaching and know what you are good at coaching and pass it off to someone else for
Gotta stay in your lane. I think that's good advice. So
for sure.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. Definitely give Beth some love. Drop a comment below. Check her out if you're in the area. If this interview helped you, please share it. And thanks again for watching. And we'll see you guys soon.
Having me, appreciate it.